You're standing in the rubble of what used to be your home. Dust still hangs in the air. Your hands are shaking. And somewhere above the silence, you ask the question that every human being has asked at least once. Why? Why did this happen? Why was it allowed? That question has echoed through every age, every tongue, every prayer whispered into the dark. And by the end of this, you won't have a simple answer, but you'll have something better. You'll have a frame wide enough to hold the weight. To get there, though, we need to start somewhere you might not expect. Not with God, not with faith, with scale. In one single year, the world recorded thousands of major disasters. Floods, quakes, storms, each one tearing through lives like paper. Tens of millions of people touched by forces they did not choose and could not control. But here's what those counts hide. Behind every tally is a person standing in rubble, dust in the air, hands shaking. The math can map the scale of hurt. It cannot touch the texture of it. So let's touch it. Think of a mother in a flooded village, waist deep in brown water, holding her child above the surface. She doesn't care about fault lines or wind patterns. She cares about the next breath. Think of a man sitting in a dark room after the funeral, staring at a wall, asking the ceiling a question the ceiling will never answer. This is what we mean when we say suffering. Not a concept, not a chapter heading, a weight pressed on a chest that won't lift. And the weight takes many forms: hunger, war, disease, grief with no name, mental anguish that leaves no scar you can point to. These strands twist together like roots under soil. Pull one and the others shift. A drought leads to hunger. Hunger leads to conflict. Conflict leads to flight. Flight leads to a camp. The camp leads to despair. One thread tied to the next, forming a web so thick you can barely see through it. But here's the fork in the road that changes the whole map. Not all pain comes from the same place. Some of it flows from choices. A hand raised in anger. A lie told for gain. A system built to crush the weak. That's one river. Call it moral hurt. The other river has no author. An earthquake doesn't choose its victims. A virus doesn't pick its host. Rain doesn't care about your roof. That second river, the one with no will behind it, is where the question gets truly sharp. Because when a person harms you, you can at least point at a cause. When the ground itself opens, who do you blame? Most people assume the answer is obvious. If God is good and strong, God should stop the quake. God should halt the flood. God should cure the child. And if God doesn't, then God is either cruel or weak. That's the common logic, and it's not wrong to feel it. But it misses a door that most people walk right past. Think of it this way. You're a parent. You watch your kid climb a tree. Every cell in your body screams to pull them down. But you don't. Because if you catch every fall, they never learn to grip. They never learn to trust their own hands. They never build the thing inside them that turns risk into strength. The branch might break. The knee might bleed. But something in the child grows that could not grow any other way. Now stretch that image, not to excuse the worst horrors, not to wave away mass death with a shrug, but to crack open a space where freedom and love can share the same room. The idea is old. Thinkers have wrestled with it for centuries. And when a broad survey asked working thinkers which lens best solved the puzzle of a good God and a broken world, the majority pointed here, to freedom. Real choice demands real risk. A world where you can choose kindness is a world where someone else can choose cruelty. You can't have one without the other. A coin with only heads isn't a coin. It's a trick. But that still doesn't explain the earthquake. No one chose the plate shifting deep underground. No one voted for the tumor. So how do the faithful make sense of pain that has no human fingerprint? This is where groups split. And the split is wider than you might think. Ask people of different traditions whether disease is punishment from above, and the answers scatter wildly. Some say yes, many say no. The gap tells you something vital. There is no single religious answer. There never was. The same storm hits two villages, and one calls it wrath, while the other calls it a test, while a third calls it just weather. The meaning isn't in the event. It's in the frame you bring to the event. And one of those frames might surprise you. Instead of asking why pain exists, It asks what pain can build. Picture a forge, not the clean kind you see in movies. A real one. Dark, hot, the air thick enough to chew. A chunk of raw metal sits in the coals, dull and rough. The smith pulls it out, glowing red, and strikes. Each blow rings through the shop. Sparks fly like angry stars. The metal screams under the hammer. If you could ask the steel what it felt, it would say, destruction. But the smith sees the blade taking shape, the edge forming, the curve rising. Something useful and sharp coming from something that was neither. Research on people who've lived through deep trauma reveals something the forge already knows. A real share of survivors don't just recover. They grow. They report new strength, deeper bonds, a sharper sense of what matters. Not because the pain was good. The pain was real and ugly and unwanted. But something in them used the fire. They came out changed, not unscarred. Changed. Now, before we let that sit too comfortably, we have to face the blade's other edge. Because this frame has a limit, and the limit matters. What about the child who doesn't survive the fire? What about the trauma that shatters and never rebuilds? What about the millions whose suffering produces no growth, no wisdom, no deeper bond? Just absence. If the forge only works when the metal is strong enough to take the heat, then the forge is not a full answer. It's a partial one. And to treat it as complete is to turn away from the darkest corner of the room. The strongest form of the objection goes like this. A truly good being, knowing everything, holding all power, would step in before the pain crossed a line, before the child died, before the village drowned, before the suffering became so vast that no possible growth could justify it. And if that being didn't step in, something in the equation is broken. That objection deserves to stand. It deserves not to be swept aside with a metaphor about hammers and steel. Because the moment you use growth to justify every horror, you've stopped asking the question honestly. Honest faith means holding two truths at once. The forge is real, and some fires burn too hot. So where does that leave us? This is where the map takes an unexpected turn. What if the problem isn't with God's goodness, but with our picture of God's power? Think of a garden, not a planned, trimmed one. A wild garden, vines climbing where they want, roots spreading in strange paths, and moving through it, quiet as breath, a gardener. Not cutting, not forcing, just watering, just turning a stone so the light hits a seed. The gardener doesn't grab the vine and twist it toward the sun. The vine grows on its own terms. But somehow, over time, it leans toward the warmth. A set of case studies looked at groups hit by disaster and asked how they felt the sacred move in the aftermath. Most didn't describe a hand reaching down to fix things. They described a pull, a nudge, a quiet sense that something was drawing them toward each other, toward help, toward meaning, not a rescue, a current. This view redraws the whole picture. Power doesn't have to mean force. A parent can be strong and still choose to guide rather than command. A God can be present and still leave room for the vine to find its own path. The gardener doesn't cause the storm. The gardener walks through it, watering what survives. But there's another layer beneath even this, and it might be the strangest one of all. What if evil isn't a thing at all? Stand in a room with a stained glass window, where the glass is whole, color pours through. Warm gold, deep blue, soft green. But where a panel is missing, there's only a harsh white gap. You don't see a new substance in that gap. You see an absence. The light is still there. The frame is still there. What's missing is the glass that would have shaped the light into something beautiful. This is one of the oldest ideas in the history of thought. Evil isn't a force pressing against good. It's a hole where good should be. Cruelty isn't the presence of a dark power. It's the absence of kindness. Sickness isn't an invading army. It's the body's order coming undone. The darkness in your room at night isn't a substance. It's just what you get when the light leaves. That reframe changes the question. Instead of asking why God created evil, you ask why there are gaps, why the glass is missing. And the answer curves back to freedom. Free beings can turn away from good. Nature can fall out of order. The gaps appear not because someone carved them, but because wholeness was never forced. Now hold all of this at once. Freedom that carries risk. Fire that can forge or destroy. A gardener who guides without grabbing. Gaps where the glass should be. These aren't four separate answers. They're four walls of the same room. And the room is big enough to hold the question without crushing it into a slogan. Here's what most people get wrong. They want one key, one clean sentence, one bumper sticker that solves the oldest question in human thought. But suffering doesn't work that way. It's not a lock with a single key. It's a landscape. Mountains and rivers and deserts and sky. You don't solve a landscape. You learn to walk through it with your eyes open. And here's what's easy to miss. The people who walk best through that landscape are rarely the ones with the neatest answers. They're the ones who sat with someone in silence when there was nothing to say. They're the ones who brought water, not wisdom. They're the ones who held a hand and didn't try to explain why the hand was shaking. After a string of natural disasters, many of those affected said they felt closer to their neighbors in the aftermath. Not because the storm was a gift, because the storm revealed what was already there. Love hiding behind small talk. The pain didn't create the bond. It stripped away everything that was blocking it. If this story has settled somewhere inside you, if it's opened a question you want to sit with longer, then you'll want to hear what comes next. We've got more stories where this one came from. Stories that don't offer easy answers but offer honest ones. Subscribe and let the next one find you. So go back to where we started. The rubble, the dust, the shaking hands, the question aimed at the sky. Maybe the sky doesn't answer because the answer isn't coming down. Maybe it's growing up, slow and stubborn, through the cracks in the stone, reaching for whatever light it can find.